Okay, well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Are we excited to talk about all the specifics about the priest today?
You bet.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so fun. Like, I mean, this is one of the passages that I read it and I'm just like, man, it's so detailed.
There's so much symbolism.
There's so much symbolism. And like, I'm sure we won't even scratch the surface of all the symbolism in it, just because there's so much. But I guess like the first question, well, not the first question, pause on that question. So I think it's really interesting. This is like one of the interesting things is like sometimes I want to go back and be like, I want to be there and listen to like when they like portioned out the portions, like when they decided where to do the portion break. Sometimes I'm like, that was an interesting choice. Because it's like, because the first like paragraph, which is the very end of chapter 27, I'm like, why did we break there? Why did we not just break at 28? And I don't have an answer for that, and it doesn't really matter. But it's like one of those things, like, I'm like, that was a choice someone made.
Were the portions made before the chapters were made, or am I wrong about that?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually don't know.
Okay.
It still says the word also.
Right.
And you're starting with also.
I know. I'm like, I don't know. I just think it's funny. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't have any bearing on anything. I just am like, really? I would have probably lumped that paragraph in with the previous portion,
Yeah.
But you know, I was not in charge. Yeah.
I don't think this is true of the Torah, but the Torah, I know that I heard that they always end that on a positive note.
Mm.
You know, the Torah, the portion from the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
They never want to end that reading on a negative, so they always end it on a positive note.
Avoid tragedies.
That's funny. Anyway.
What chapter verse are we?
We're 27:20 is where we start.
Okay.
So it's this interesting, but I like this little paragraph. I think it's a great one because it's talking about the olive oil, the pure olive oil, that is burning in the lamps in the tabernacle at this point. I almost said temple, which also was there. And it burns from evening to morning. And so this is this kind of like eternal light. And so what's fun about this, what I like about this is, and this is pointed out in some of the commentaries, is like really this actually instruction is really one of the only ones that's really carried forward, because every synagogue has this, we kind of call it like an eternal light or this ever-burning light. And many, if you attend more traditional Orthodox type congregations, Catholic does it, Lutheran does it, I think Anglican, they all have this constantly burning light, and it's from this. So it's this light that never goes out. So it's really one of the only commandments about the tabernacle that's actually carried forward, which is kind of fun. It's kind of cool. So that's a fun little tidbit about that. And then we get into chapter 28 and 29, and it's all about the priesthood. 28 is all about the garments of the priest, and then 29 is this consecration of the priesthood. So I think my question to start is, because we already mentioned how detailed it is and how much symbolism there is, but at the same time, we know that that this was forced, like this, we don't have this today, right? We don't have a high priest, we don't have a temple. So we don't have anybody functioning in this, and we haven't for quite a long time. I imagine that God in his infinite wisdom and knowledge knew that. Knew that eventually we would get to a season of thousands of years that we don't have this happening, that we don't have anybody wearing these garments and doing these practices and passing down this family line. So why do you think he's so particular about it? Like, why do you think it's still important that we have all of this detail and all of this symbolism, even though we haven't done this for a couple thousand years?
Well, doesn't it get reinstated based on Ezekiel?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would think that they would need to go back and refresh themselves on how to do this.
But does it mean anything to us right now?
Well, I would say it's a type and shadow of Yeshua as the great high priest.
Okay.
Or do a different order, but.
The angle wasn't working.
I see. I was like,
I do.
You're
I
ready
don't
to-
like not being able to see after class.
that's fair. That's fair. I was like, are you offended? You're trying to get further away. Have I made you mad already? Anyway, yes, this is a type of
You
shadow.
broke a new
Yeshua, like you
record.
said.
Also, just making sure that the definition of priesthood is specific, carrying Israel on
Mhm.
your shoulder,
Mhm.
being, I don't know all of that, but just
Sure,
being
yeah.
specific about that and carrying it forward even if we don't have,
Mm-hmm.
setting the standard for it in a way.
Yeah.
I read on the Chabad website that some of the rabbis say that even though we don't have the temple, just the study of how to build the temple, Hashem equates to having the temple.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
there's that
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, there's a lot of. So it's interesting because the temple and the rebuilding of the temple in Jewish tradition varies widely based on which, if you're talking about Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, all these different groups of within Judaism, what you're talking about. It's really interesting actually, because there are some who are like, yes, we're looking, who very much feel like, temple service almost is embodied within some of the synagogue service. They're praying for the rebuilding of the temple. Kind of what you're saying is that like the study of it kind of keeps it, is almost as like it's there, that like, the temple is very important. And then there's and then on the other end of the spectrum, there's like, no, we're not praying for the temple to be rebuilt. Like there's not even the desire for that. And then all kinds of other variations in between. There's kind of the two poles, and then there's all kinds of opinions in the middle, which is really, really interesting. So the temple is a very polarizing thing. And of course, when we read, we have some understanding that there's going to be some kind of temple rebuilt. There's disagreement about when in the process that happens, and we're not going to chase the eschatological rabbit today. But
that would be fun.
I know, but we're not going to go there. It is fascinating, and it's interesting to talk about. I mean, and there's also, you can visit in Jerusalem. You can visit the Temple Institute where they have made you can see the garments that they've made. That you can see some of the furniture, if you will. The golden menorah is actually out behind very thick bulletproof glass, but it's actually out on the plaza. You walk by it, like kind of outside, right outside of the Kotel Western Wall Plaza. It's out there, and you just walk by it. This solid gold, very large menorah. It's beautiful, and you can tell that it's behind about 12 inches of bulletproof glass. So they're working on this, and it's all these, so there's, but it's like, and so that's interesting to wonder about what this is going to be, but it's interesting to think about. So yes, this is definitely, I mean, if and when there's going to be a temple and sacrificial system and priesthood reestablished, then it's helpful to know, how you're supposed to do that and what, some of these instructions. I think it's really interesting to think about just kind of the priesthood and its function in general. And it's, it's like, of course, the priests are the ones who do the sacrifices. They function in the temple, but it's like, but some of the things about how God established the priesthood and some of the instructions about some of these garments and some of this process and some of these whatever is really interesting. So one of the things about this priesthood is that, because this is what I like about Dennis Prager's commentaries, is because he's bringing out how this system for Israel is different than the sacrificial and priestly systems of all the other nations around. So so for one thing, we have this hereditary priesthood, right? It's like you don't become a priest by what you do or don't do. You don't become a priest by being elected by the people. You don't become a priest by killing the priest before you. Like, you don't. You know? I'm serious. Like, other nations, that's what's happening. You know, you're negotiating and probably doing some really corrupt things to be a priest. But this one, it's God says, you know, Aaron's the high priest and his sons and this tribe, that's it. So, and it's again, it's like our Western minds particularly like to build hierarchies, right? So our brains kind of like to go to the point of like, well, then Aaron was, you know, the top person, and then his sons and all these, like, you know, were this, and then there's the rest of Israel and their lesser status. And that's not what this is saying. I know I bring this up a lot, but I think it's really important. So I probably will continue to keep bringing it up. It's not a status. It's different, right? It's much in the same way that we believe that Israel, the Jewish people today, still have this particular calling that is to be a light to the nations, right? And this particular role, and are called to live this particular way. And yet they're not better than all the rest of the nations of the world, right? It's just a different calling and a different role. And the more we can embrace that, like, even think about, like, again, I know this is like foundational stuff and we know this, but I think it's good for us to like revisit this every once in a while. Of just this, like, I can even think about like groups of people. You know, here at Kingdom Living, we tend to do a lot of things in team, which sometimes means things happen slowly. Right? But I'm not sure there's any ministry or any part of what happens at Kingdom Living that's done by one person. It's all done as, you know, either in pairs at the very least or as a team and things like that. And I think about that sometimes, and sometimes it's frustrating because sometimes it's like personality difference can rub on one another, right? But everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. And the more that you embrace that, right, the more you actually can find the Lord together, and actually the better things go. Like if you have a group of people and you're working towards a common goal, and you know, okay, this person is great at the admin and the scheduling all the thing, and this person is great at the creating the artwork for this thing, and this person is great at, you know, and everybody brings their strength to it and is also willing to say, this is a weak spot for me, so this is not the best role for me to take on this team. Like, the more we can all embrace that, actually the better things go. And I think it's a very similar thing when we look at the structure of Israel and even the relationship between Israel and the nations. It's like if we all look at who God has created us to be and we enjoy the differences and are willing to be, you know, let that rub sometimes of like, sometimes it's hard when someone is good at something that you're not, or has a role that you're not supposed to, you know, has a role that you don't have or whatever. Because I'm sure in Israel, like there's probably, you know, people in other tribes that saw this operation of the priesthood, and there's something in their heart that was like, I wish I could do that, but that's not what my role is. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to watch someone do something that you feel like you want to do. And I mean, even out of purity of heart, wanting to do it maybe, but that's just not how it was set up. And so then you have to find the Lord in your own way. Like, it's hard sometimes when we see that, because we sometimes want to be in roles that other people are in, but it's not. My main point is that it's not a hierarchy, right? We're not like, there are particular rules and functions of the high priest and the priesthood, and they do have, in some sense, you could say, higher requirements for certain things, and we'll talk about some of those things at some point, maybe if we get there. But that doesn't mean that they're better than, or that they are more holy, that they are more of anything. Mm-hmm. It means this is how God designed the structure, and we have to learn how to live within that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like in Hebrews 5,
mm-hmm.
When they're talking about, and that's kind of the same thing of this high priest, where it says, "For every Kohen Gadol taken from among men is appointed to act on behalf of the people in matters relating to God, so that he may offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to empathize with the ignorant and deluded, since he himself is also subject to weakness." So that right there, I mean, I feel like in this, Paul's trying to correct a few things,
mm-hmm.
you know, on how you view a high priest.
Mm-hmm.
It says, For this reason, he has to make offerings for sin, just as for the people, so also for himself. And no one takes the honor for himself, but only when he is called by God, as Aaron was. So it's kind of like, this isn't like an honor you take for yourself. This is a calling.
Yeah.
So the Lord picked
Right.
the priests. They didn't cast lots. They didn't have a vote. This was not a democracy thing on that. This was,
Right.
this is how what God appointed, and this is how he wants them to look, act, be set up. And yeah, I was reading the Torah story portion on this, on the priests and their garments. And they had pointed out that the priests' garments are the same color, same cloth and everything that you use to decorate the temple itself. So in a sense, they were almost like a microcosm of the temple. And so that when the people looked at the priest in that garment, he was like connected to the temple. Like this is, and it totally made him the connecting point between God and man, as far as offering up, being able to go in the same way that Moses went up and the people stood afar and like, you go talk. Well, now we've got this person, but those garments, all the colors, the feel of it, the first thing that's supposed to come to your mind is the temple. And that temple is that sacred space that the Lord dwells.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like, not only because God liked it that way, but he was trying to focus their attention to the importance of this. And even, I don't want to get too far, we were talking even this morning, like, of the clothing, like, even the 2 stones that he has to wear on his shoulder, right? The Lord could have said, just embroider the names. I mean, that would have been lightweight and easy. No, let's take 2 stones so he can go in carrying the weight of these people.
Right.
And the weight of what this is. So there's just like I said, just so rich in symbolism. Because the Lord, I feel like on every step of this is trying to get a point across to not only the high priest, but those who look at the high priest.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose that, obviously, Moses was not the priesthood.
Well, he was a Levite, so he's in the tribe.
Okay. But he was Moses.
He was Moses.
Why didn't he have anything special he was supposed to wear? He's Moses.
Great question.
He's not gonna be there though when they create he's not gonna go with them into the land.
Neither is Aaron.
True.
No, this is good. I like this. Yeah.
Well, it seems
we're gonna keep going. Keep going.
It seems that it was actually God's original intent for Moses to do all of that, but because Moses gave 5 excuses not to obey God, and God said, "Fine, I'll get Aaron to help you," that it got shared. But it seemed like if Moses obeyed without giving 5 excuses, that he probably would have had that privilege as well.
I think it's possible.
I was just gonna, to Lori's point and yours too, about to not exalt a man. And so he's getting to the point that those priests had to make sacrifices for their own sins and all this, and it is that reminder, no matter what position of leadership someone has, the Lord is our great high priest, and he's the head of the whole thing. So never to exalt a man, no matter what, in what position.
Yeah.
And look at the man that was picked, the man that made the golden calf.
Yeah.
And lied about it.
Blamed it on the people, and now he's got to carry his own guilt and the people's guilt before the Lord constantly. Like, that's now your role.
Right.
You know, you were influenced by the people, you blamed what you did on the people, and now the Lord, it's like that. It almost kind of makes me think of like how Yeshua asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Like this. It's a redemptive thing, But it's also a reminder in
Right.
a lot of ways of what you did.
Right. And many look at the Day of Atonement instruction, Leviticus 16, the high point of the Torah. We're getting so close to Leviticus, guys. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. As kind of a response to this golden calf incident, because what happens with the golden calf, right? They sinned, they fell into idolatry. So the temple already, or the tabernacle, is already defiled.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already so that we have a problem. A holy God can't dwell in a defiled tabernacle. This holy place that he instructed to be built to dwell in, you have a problem already. And with the people, there's also broken relationship with the people, which is actually the main point. And so the Day of Atonement is this process of restoring holiness and bringing atonement, so that the holy God can continue to dwell with his people and have a relationship with the people, and the people can continue to approach his presence. But back to your question about why Moses doesn't have such a specific garment. So I think it could be possible that there was because even though he's a Levite, the point is that he's not the high priest, right? Because that's why Aaron, this garment is for the high priest. So, and I think that does come down to, I think that part of that is that when God called Moses, he's like, I don't want to do this. No thanks. And so Aaron comes, the Lord's like, fine, Aaron can be your mouthpiece. And so he kind of brings Aaron alongside, and then this goes through. I think another part of that, another facet to this question is that Moses is a thing. Moses is a unique person, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's also this element of Moses fulfills multiple roles. So he does somewhat fulfill the role of the priest, but he's also kind of just this other character. He's kind of a pre-messianic. He's definitely a pre-Messiah figure in how he functions with the Lord, and he has this really unique interaction, way of interacting with the Lord. And yes, Moses also was disobedient. He didn't get to go into the land. But also, I think the Lord is constantly in this kind of careful process of using Moses as this particular figure to help lead the people. And it says in some place, it says that Moses is like God to the people. So he's representing the Lord to the people and the people to the Lord, which is a very priestly function. But also, there have to be other people who can carry roles and who can carry responsibility. And it is one of the main reasons I think that ultimately that Moses is not, again, I know there's his disobedience as part of this too, but it's that he's not able to go in, that he's not the leader that takes them in, because he is not actually God. And so they have to, the people have to be able to function without Moses eventually. And so I think part of the priesthood being established through Aaron and his line that then is going to be passed down from generation to generation is also about it just can't be Moses. Moses can't be everything. There has to be a system in place so that the people can continue to function and follow the Lord without Moses.
With garments, this garment here that the high priest is wearing is supposed to not magnify or glorify that high priest. They even call the breastplate of judgment.
Yeah.
And it's this isn't to exalt the high priest. This is to draw the eyes of the people onto what this function does with their sin, right? So let's think about modern day monarchy and the kings and whatever. You start putting Moses in gold and stuff, you put him in an exalted outfit. We're already talking about the fact that he was like God to the people. God's not going to have the people worship Moses.
Right.
He's supposed to worship them. And I believe that when you exalt yourself in clothing and stuff, you're trying to draw that onto yourself. Is kind of, and I know obviously I see him cringing, so
Yes,
he's not
you're wrong.
agreed.
Yeah.
Wow.
kind of believe that another one of the reasons Moses didn't go into the promised land and it was Joshua is because these people would be following Moses almost as a god again in there rather than, and so to me it feels like to put Moses in garments of glory, he's already exalted by the people. Why bring that up another level?
For sure. And I think also, like, so I think also there's this element of, again, with, like, not leading, like, at some point the people become, like, there are points when the people become very dependent on Moses. And I think what just came to mind was, like, toward the end of Deuteronomy, when he's laying out blessings and curses and things like that, and he says, this is not too difficult for you. This is not, the Torah is not far off. The Torah is not too difficult for you to follow. And I think part of that is it's like, it doesn't, like, it's not all dependent on Moses. Like, the people being able to follow the Lord is not dependent on Moses. Like, it's known to the people. That's why it's read corporately. It's why it's taught corporately, why they functioned as a nation in certain ways, why the priests are doing this thing, which I want to come back to a comment about another point about what you said about the garments and the colors and things like that. But I think, I mean, Moses is supposed to point and kind of be this launching point of the people of Israel to obedience. He's not to be the source of their obedience. Now, we see that people go against Moses, obviously, too. Like, because humans are human. So, and like, so we have these moments like where they follow what he says and these moments where they don't, because humans are not very good at, humans are just human. But, but I think the whole point is that, like, Moses can't be the source of their obedience. It has to be all these other things. That's why he's using Moses to establish and set this up, because they need a leader. Like, they need someone to help them figure this process out, because they've just been slaves for 400 years. But it can't always be that, right? Stan, what's your pushback?
Well,
What's your problem?
Because your wife sits there blue.
I know. Why are we wrong?
I'm not suggesting that God should have enrobed him in garments of glory.
Sure.
But I would have thought, and I'm not going to say it was a mistake. It's not. I mean, he knows what he's doing. But it
we hope.
But it seems interesting to me that there was nothing that said, this is Moses. It's like playing Where's Waldo? Waldo had the red and white stripes, but that's Waldo.
Yeah.
And something that identifies him from, singles him out from everybody else. But
yeah. And
it seems
we
odd to
also,
me
but we also don't know that he didn't have something. We don't have an instruction from the Lord, but we don't know he didn't have, that he didn't look a particular way.
His face shining so bright
Yeah.
that people couldn't look at him.
Yeah, people couldn't look at him after he was in the presence of the Lord. So maybe he did have an outfit of glory. It was the glory of the Lord.
They
I feel like he doesn't need it either.
Right. I think everybody knows who Moses is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like he doesn't need it. Like, especially in more relational cultures, like when I worked in the Dominican Republic, literally everyone in town knew my name because I was like the head person of an organization. Like, everyone knows who Moses is. Like, he doesn't need anything to say, this is Moses.
Yeah. And I do think when he went before the Lord, he probably had he had reference coming before the Lord, right? And so he may have had his own type of garment that was not this, but I don't know. We can only wonder, but he did seem to stand out well enough without having to.
red and white sweater.
Yeah. I don't think they had to play Where's Moses very often. I don't think they had to go searching. I think they generally knew where to find him.
But I mean, they did seem strongly to not respect him to an extreme many times. Like after
because humans are like, I don't like this, so I'm going to do something else.
Well, like after the 12 spies, let's stone Moses, choose another leader, and go back to Egypt. I mean, that's pretty severe.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Faith.
Well, now this is all bringing me to the thought that with Yeshua, there was nothing about his appearance that would draw us to him in the way we would be drawn.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't
King-
walking around in a blue sash.
No, or drawing attention to
Or a gold
himself,
sash or a
even
red
his
sash, or-
physical- You know,
Which does
and even, you know, you think about it, we think of him as handsome, like
Mhm.
a handsome man, or that's how he's portrayed. Well, probably wasn't what our eyes would see as a necessarily handsome
Mhm.
man, because even that, the humility of the form he took.
Yeah.
Anyway, just for that.
No.
Yeah, that's
good.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Of course, I think of George Washington in this discussion because if I look at the Torah as Israel's constitution, then I think about our constitution and how wise it was to have separation of powers.
Mm-hmm.
And George Washington did not want to be king. I guess there's talk about naming him for
Mhm.
his office as the king.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they had a bad experience with kings.
You don't need another king.
And
George.
so, and you know, Moses' father-in-law, you know, says what you're doing is not good. You're trying to judge all these cases. So that institutes the separation of the judges and so forth. And so I think there's wisdom in
Yeah.
not having that centrality. But like
For sure.
what's been said, it's good to have a leader. Although, you know, you have the whole Saul, we want a king, you know.
Right.
He comes up
Right.
and all that. So
Which goes back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago. This sometimes the Torah is revolutionary and sometimes it's evolutionary, right? And even like the king one is really interesting in that it's more of an evolutionary, supposed to be, because God says that it's not good for them to have a king, but He's also like, but I know you're gonna want a king. Why? Because everybody else has a king. And so if you have a king, these are the things this king must do, right?
Yeah.
Unto following the Lord. And we have lots of examples then, right? This king did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and everything went well. This king really did not, and things were bad. He didn't tear down the high places. People were falling into idolatry and all these things, and they went to war and they lost all these people. And then this king came and he was obedient and the Lord restored and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, like we watched this back and forth, right? It's like God knew what He was talking about. And so, but it's one of those things that's like, it would be better for them to not have a king. But they kind of can't process how that works. And so the Lord's like, okay, well, if you're going to have a king, then you have to do this. Yeah.
But I mean, a king is prophesied in the Torah. I mean, it talks about. I mean, did you feel like that was something that God wanted, or just assumed, okay, you're going to have it, so therefore these are the rules?
I mean, I think it very much it says like, when you ask for a king, this is what you have to do. But it doesn't say when I bring you this king. It's like He knows people.
So it's kind of like one of those, because your hearts are hard, I'm going to do this for you, but
Yeah.
kind of another example.
Yeah, I mean, because they want them to just follow the Lord as their king, so to speak. They don't
By
want.
the time the king came in, they were kind of rejecting the priesthood.
Right.
Because the priesthood was not good at that point in time.
Right. So, circling back to our conversation, because we're actually here to talk about the priests.
Yeah.
So, so thank you for bringing us back to the priesthood. So, and Lori brought up those verses from Hebrews earlier, and also she made a comment that Hebrews isn't Paul.
We don't know who Hebrews is. People think.
But you said
maybe
something
Paul.
about Paul also. But Paul is correct. Whatever. In other places, he is correcting things. Yeah, we don't know who wrote Hebrews. But another fascinating conversation for another day. What was I going to say? Oh, but because also remember at that point, like Paul and the other New Testament writers are interacting with this idea of priesthood and not suggesting that it go away, right? Because this is a common aspect of replacement theology. Is like the temple service went away, and it's like, well, they're still very much functioning within it. Another conversation for another day. But Paul and the New Testament writers are interacting, and the writer of Hebrews and all this are interacting with this and making some corrections, like Lori said. Why? Because the priesthood in the Second Temple period was not this priesthood. It was not from the line of Aaron. So which is why there's corruption, and there's this partnership between the priests and Rome, which ultimately led to Yeshua being crucified. It's messy. It's really messy because it was not the right priesthood. So, going back to the point that we were talking about previously of there's some benefit to this hereditary priesthood, right? There's a benefit to that, but that was lost along the way, and then this priesthood that was not from the right line is instated, and then it's not. You lose all the benefit of what it was supposed to be. It becomes a political office, and that's not what it's meant to be.
And it caused disunity.
It caused a lot of issues
rift in the community because some were willing to accept it,
right.
Some were not, and we're going to have to go off and do this.
Right.
So it's almost like you see the church splits.
Exactly.
And this was the same thing, and a lot of that first arguments had to do with priesthood, people setting up priests that were not based off of how the Lord told them to do it.
Right. And then the other side of that then is then if there's going to be another temple, then how are we going to know we get the right priesthood? And I don't have an answer, and I don't really want to talk about it. The Lord's going to figure that one out. And that's where we're going to leave that, because we're going to keep going on this. So I wanted to make a comment that Lori was bringing out the point that the priestly garments are in the colors of the curtains and the tabernacle artwork and weavings and things like that, right? It's the same ones. And so he would, not that he would blend and disappear, you wouldn't see him, but it's part of the whole, right? And so it helps, so if we think about that, to me, that helps us build the connection of it helps us make the jump of the tabernacle as a place to we are the temple of God, right? If he's clothed in that and he's the one communing, because so the calling of Israel as a whole, right, is to be this priestly nation, is to be this light to the nations. They're to be interceding for other nations. So then if you go inside of Israel, if that's the role that as a whole they're supposed to be, then it would make sense that within Israel there's this role where there are priests within to show what that looks like. To show what that looks like, to have a priestly function and priests that are kind of this mediator, this interacting point, I don't know what the right word is, there's a word for it that I'm not coming up with, between God and the people. So it's almost this micro expression of the macro, we have these layers going out, right? Because if Israel is to be this call and to fulfill this role as a whole, then they need to know what that looks like even within themselves. Okay. And then one of the things I wanted to bring out, because it was what was sticking out to me, and I'm not sure that I don't know that I have a lot of profound things to say about it, other than it was just what stuck out to me this time reading through, are things like these couple of instances where we have the names of all the tribes of Israel that are on these garments, on stones on these garments that are then going into the presence of the Lord with the priest. So in chapter 28, verse 9, you are to take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of Bnei Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the names of the other remaining 6 on the other stone in the order of their birth. Down in 12, fasten the 2 stones upon the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be memorial stones for Bnei Israel. So these are the 2 stones on the shoulder pieces, right? With the names of the tribes. So then we keep going, and down in verse 15, make a breastplate of breastplate of judgment, which Laura was also mentioning, the work of a skillful craftsman, and it describes all of the colors and then all the stones. And in verse 21, the stones are to be engraved in the order of the names of Bnei Israel, 12 according to their names, like the etchings of a signet seal, one corresponding to each name of the 12 tribes. So you have the 12 tribes on the shoulders, right, and on the breastplate. So why twice? Why isn't one? Why is not having the names? Why is having them once not enough? I don't really have an answer.
Strong emphasis.
Okay.
But also, do we know, the stones, Do we know symbolism of stones and if there was a meaning of what that stone represented, and does it match the name of that tribe of Israel? Do we have any idea about that?
I have not really looked into that in great detail. I'm sure somebody has come up with something.
Okay.
The text does not tell us, so maybe.
Okay.
I'm sure the Lord has an idea of I'm sure the Lord has a reason, but it doesn't say that here. I'm sure that there is somebody who has done a study probably of different stones in different tribes throughout the Bible and has come and has suggested something, but I have never looked into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do find it interesting that each tribe is represented by a different stone, which
Yes.
is showing a unique identity
Mm-hmm.
for each tribe.
Yeah.
So he is making sure, that this isn't just one mass
Mhm.
group. These tribes still have their own identities. And to me, the difference I saw between the stones, the weight stones on the shoulder, which were referred to as memorial stones, like bringing this
Mhm.
into remembrance, but the ones on the breastplate is a judgment
Mm-hmm.
breastplate.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like these have two different functions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing them before you, remember these tribes. Now here's
Mm-hmm.
the judgment thing of we're taking care of business here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course those are being carried, the weight is carried on his shoulder, but the judgment's carried over his heart, over his chest. And so, or his inner being is
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
the Hebrews always looked at that. And so there is like that symbolism of the weight of carrying them, yet what's on your heart about them. So I do think there is a two-factor.
Yeah, for sure.
And Emma, am I remembering correctly that men and women could not marry outside of their tribe? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. 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 It's brought up several times. I mean, one of the times is with the daughters of Zelophehad, the daughters who get the inheritance, they're instructed to marry. And it has to do with the inheritance of the land. Because, each tribe is allotted a certain portion of land. And so if you intermarry tribes, which eventually, of course, they did, but then it becomes complicated of, whose land is whose. So, yes, I think the ideal was, and the initial ideal was that they would marry within their own tribes. But
they're never commanded, you cannot marry without outside your tribe. Right?
But I think I think it was the ideal because of different things of the example of Zelophehad's daughters and within the priesthood, does it say? I can't remember if the priest, if it specifically says.
No, they had to marry virgins. They couldn't marry divorced women.
Right. Yeah, I know it says that. I don't think it specifically says they have to marry within the Levites. So, I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think that it. Well, I mean, I guess if they married a daughter from another, that land would still stay within the land of the husband, and so it kind of works out. So I guess they can some, but there are instances where they're not allowed to, like the daughters, because the daughters, if they marry men from other tribes, then the land that was from their tribe would go to the other, and that is not supposed to happen. Yeah, but things get complicated along the way.
But okay, I understand it completely different. They were able to marry. The man is the head of the household, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the men are the tribes, and they can marry whatever they want. Their men are the ones carrying the lands,
Mm-hmm.
and not the women. That's why when they had this tribe with no man, that's when God finally says, "Okay, you guys are allowed to marry your own tribe." So
Right, because the land has to stay.
so that land can stay.
Yeah.
So before that, they were able to marry whoever. That was my understanding.
Okay.
That
Not
wasn't
that
their
important. I was just
tradition,
curious.
though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's hard to know. I mean, because they're so. I mean, I think it comes down to, because the other part of that, then it just comes down to because it depends on how the bride price was determined too, right? Of what was negotiated as far as livestock and things like that. And so I think different tribes would complicate some of that. So yeah, it happened, and I don't think it was, you cannot, except for in this situation where it's the daughter, so they have to stay within the tribe so that things don't get messed up there. But I mean, I think it's just, I don't know. There's a lot of factors to it. So I think it's not that it's not allowed, but I don't know. I don't know how much it happens. I mean, over time it definitely happens more and more, but things get complicated, and they negotiate, and I don't know. Israel and land is always a complicated thing, including currently. So, I was gonna say something. Okay.
You're gonna jump to verse 29.
I'm gonna jump to verse 29.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I knew somebody was gonna bring it up. I was like, because I don't know. I don't know anything about the Urim and Thummim. I've not done a deep dive into that, and it's.
Tom taught on it on one of his last ambassadors.
I wasn't at that one. I haven't listened to it. I heard it was really good, but I haven't actually listened to that one.
No, I like not
anyway.
so much what they are, but where he had to carry them. I think that's like the symbolism on that. Because if this was asking the instructions of the Lord, even sometimes correcting things of the law with it, the fact that they had to carry that over their heart meant that you're hearing from the Lord through this, so carry it over your heart. Yeah. And so I just I always kind of try to envision created this little pocket.
Yeah.
Because it's like
little dice. Yeah.
Well, it's not a magic 8-ball. I did determine that. But
that's good.
Yeah. But I'm sitting there thinking that the weight of all of this stuff. Can you imagine how much these garments that
for
stones,
sure.
and now we're carrying more stones, and now we're going to make a pocket, and you're going to carry this. It's and you're in the middle of the desert.
Right. It's like the original weighted vest. That's a thing people will wear, weighted vest. It's like a health thing.
It's heavy.
Sorry.
Am I misunderstanding? I thought the stones were
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know how big they are.
Well,
it doesn't say.
It seemed like they used it to cast lots.
Well, the Urim and Thummim, but then they also have the 12 stones. So what's interesting? What's interesting is so they have this breastplate of judgment that has the 12 stones for the 12 tribes, and then you have the Urim and Thummim, whatever we understand those to actually be. On the breastplate, also for judgment. And so it's this idea that judgment is carried over the heart, right? Which I think is, I don't know, I guess maybe it's just maybe the simplest, I think it's one of those situations where the simplest understanding is maybe the best. Of that God cares about our hearts. God judges our hearts, right? There's all this symbolism of carrying judgment, like the judgment for the tribes and the judgment for all these issues over the heart. I feel like the Lord is trying to say something, and He's not trying to be difficult about it.
It's a heart issue.
It's a heart issue. That He judges the heart, that He cares about the hearts. Even again, thinking about Yeshua, and again, we bring this up all the time of his conflict with the Pharisees is not about what they're doing; it's about their hearts, and all these different things. And so, the heart matters. Your heart before the Lord matters, right? And I think we even see that, and then going on of just I think this is really interesting, and they have actually found the pomegranates, or some of them at least, or a couple. But then on the hem, you are to have pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet all around the hem, golden bells between them, golden bell and a pomegranate. It must be worn by Aaron whenever he ministers. The sound will be heard when he goes into the holy place before Adonai and when he comes out, so that he does not die. It's so apparently The Lord doesn't.
Stuff.
It sounds really. It sounds like it's like so you can't you don't want to sneak up on the Lord, like you're gonna spook him and he's gonna kill you or something.
Don't startle God.
But if he's not sure where you are because he can't hear you,
Right,
he
I know. I think it's
accidentally.
kind of funny in that sense. I'm being really silly about it, but it's also. I think it's all. I actually think it's more for the other people than for the Lord. I'm being silly. I'm being like, can't spook God. He's gonna kill you. That's not what I mean. I'm just being silly.
Or so that he does not die could be do it my way.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it's
That is
definitely
holy.
it definitely is this principle, right? Because later on, Aaron's sons, everybody likes to be like,
Profane fire.
what was the unholy fire, or what was the unauthorized fire, what was it? And it's like it doesn't matter what it was. The point is they approached God in a way that He didn't instruct. So it is. There's very particular about you, like you are to do it this way. I also think the bells were more about other people hearing Aaron because we talked about earlier, like Aaron and his sons, the high priest, does have a higher code to follow. Like they are not allowed to come in contact with dead bodies or all the, things considered unclean. Like there is because of this presence of the Lord issue. So there are these higher. So part of the other people partnering with this role of the high priest is that they also are taking care to make sure that the high priest doesn't violate these certain instructions, right? Mm-hmm. So if they have bells and you can hear where he is, and your mother just passed away and you had her funeral, I can't go touch him, right? So you need to hear when he's coming, so you can also be respectful of that because it's about ministering to the presence of the Lord, right? Yeah.
Well, just that principle, which is written, to him who much is given, much will be required. So
right.
Not that they're better, but there is a higher requirement, a higher expectation, and in the practical, it's why we really do need to pray for those in leadership.
Yeah.
Because when they fall, so many people are affected.
Right.
And I could say a lot about that.
We have some big examples currently.
Yeah.
Right, which goes back to another of why leading and functioning as a team, right? That's why we actually don't have a singular congregational leader of this congregation. We have a team of elders that lead together, right? And this is partially why, yeah.
Do we have one elder that's kind of a head elder, or are they all equal?
We do not.
Okay, cool.
We used to, but we do not. Which is unique.
Which is what?
Is unique.
Yeah.
That we don't have we don't actually have, technically speaking, we don't have a congregational leader. We have an eldership team.
This trail, but is there something to, again, the calling of the Lord, that God calls a certain person, not that they are without accountability. That's the whole purpose of elders and being under a covering and all of that. I'm just saying within God's economy, there's a way to yet, I don't want to say, prevent that totalitarianism.
Yeah.
The king, what the king says, the king
gets.
And
right. Yeah. No. There's not like there should never be a singular leader of anything, or even it's wrong to have a congregational leader. That's not what we're saying. We're as I said, we're kind of unique in that we have organized the way that we have, and there are ways, and I know I know many congregations who do this well, where they have a lead pastor, and then and depending on what language and what structure they have created, an elder board or whatever that leads alongside, and that can be done well. So I'm not saying it's wrong to have a singular leader, but I still think that leading in team truly is healthier than one guy with all the power who goes somewhat unchecked and isn't having regular interaction and accountability and relationship building. Because it's also if you talk to many leaders, many people who are senior leaders of congregations or ministries or things like that, often what comes out is the loneliness. They don't have deep relationship, which is one of the reasons we don't have that, is because our elders are so committed to having deep relationship and leading from that place that it's they don't want anybody to have a chance of feeling isolated from that. So So I think so yes, you can still have a leader, but there still has to be a strong relational structure for that to be healthy.
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
They should have relationships.
Yes, yes. It shouldn't feel like because I'm the pastor, I can't actually have friends. I can't have, people to be vulnerable with, or people to care for me, or whatever. Like it shouldn't, like that shouldn't be what's happening. Okay. I want to skip down to, so then we have chapter 29. We have all these instructions about consecrating the priesthood, which is very interesting. Very interesting. The animals, there's a lot of symbolism that we don't really have time to really even scratch the surface of. But one of the things I love is towards the end of the chapter. They've gone through this whole process of these animals and consecrating Aaron and the priests, and there's this interesting thing about sprinkling. Well, Aaron gets the oil poured on him. Everybody else just gets sprinkled. But there's this interesting thing about blood, which this is another silly thing. This is my mind goes. It's like they have these beautiful garments, and then they like splatter oil and blood and things, and I'm like, okay. Anyway. I know. I'm like, oh, really? Anyway, maybe that's just me. Sorry, guys. This is what you get with me, is you get all the weird places my brain goes sometimes. But anyway, so you have all these instructions, and then we get to the end of the chapter. And so again, this is like reinforcing this idea that like how they approach the Lord and how they come into the tabernacle to serve is really important. And that the priests are not exempt from needing to sacrifice, because they're still humans. They still sin. They still need atonement. They still, right? Like, so they're not like, again, to bring out the point that they're not perfect either. They're not holier than anyone else necessarily. They still have to participate in all these practices. Let's see. I'm just going to read the last section of this chapter. So this is starting verse 38 of chapter 29. Now this is what you are to offer upon the altar: 2 one-year-old lambs each day continually. You are to offer 1 lamb in the morning and the other lamb at dusk. Offer along with the first lamb 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil and 1/4 of a hin of wine as a drink offering. The other lamb you are to offer at dusk, like the grain offering and drink offering in the morning, as a sweet aroma, to be an offering made by fire to Adonai. It is to be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations at the entrance of the tent of meeting before Adonai. There I will meet with you and to speak with you there. I will meet with Bnei Israel there, so it will be sanctified by my glory. So I will sanctify the tent of meeting and the altar. I will also sanctify Aaron and his sons to minister to me as Kohanim. So I will dwell among Bnei Israel and be their God. Then they will know that I am Adonai their God, who brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, so that I may live among them. I am Adonai their God. So, I love that this kind of all this process and all this instruction about the priests ends with, so that I can meet with you from the Lord, right? This is what I love. This is why I love Leviticus, is because I just feel like it's like the Lord just being like, I want to be with you. Please help me be with you. So he ends all this instruction about how the priests are set apart and how specific everything is with, I want to meet with you there and speak to you, and it will be sanctified by his glory. And it's interesting again that it brings up, and of course they're very close to coming out of Egypt. Like, this is still the first generation. This is still like they're the ones who came out of Egypt, so it's still very fresh to them. But he's identifying himself as the one who brought them out of Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that this is one of the main ways that God identifies himself is the God of Israel who brought them out of Egypt is significant, right? And it's why we do Passover every year and all these things. But I liked this is some observations of Dennis Prager that he brought out, and also in the TLV it says, so that I may live among them. and dwell is another way. I think there's another translation I saw recently that said abide. But the point is he wants to be with his people. So there, like these are a couple of Dennis Prager's observations about that and how he identifies himself there. One is that he did not create the world. He did not just create the world, but he continues to take an active role in human history. So many other ancient traditions, it's like whatever, God creates the world and then leaves and lets humans run rampant and do their crazy. And God is like, I created the world so that I can be with you in it, right? Also, it shows he cares about human suffering. Like he saw, remember, like when they're about to be delivered, it's God saw their suffering and remembered his people, right? And again, it's not that he forgot them, it's that he's now going to take action. And so he cares about suffering and he wants to bring justice to that. He also wants people to be free, right? And I think this is true of all people, right? And this is one of the big emphases, and this is one of the things that's emphasized about the people of Israel and this wilderness stage is like what he's working on doing is getting them out of a slavery mentality and into we are a nation of our own and functioning with the leadership of the Lord. And also just that he has this, which we've already talked about, he has this special role for the Jewish people, which is why he brought them out of Egypt and didn't just let them continue to be this enslaved people that would either eventually be killed off or assimilated into Egypt. Because there is this calling of Israel to be a light to the nations. So he has this particular role, right? That's always what it comes back to with Israel. And why is he why is he so specific about these certain things with them? And it's because they are supposed to look different than the other nations in order to be this priestly nation that we were talking about earlier, and point the rest of the world to the God of Israel, the creator of the universe. And then finally, we're making it through the whole portion, guys. One quick comment about this last little section, this little first part of chapter 30, about the altar of incense. That this specific altar, and it's meant to be there, and there's supposed to be this incense burning while they're tending the lamps and really at all times, which is why, again, some Orthodox traditions will have incense as part of a service. And it's what I love, and actually really what we see kind of maybe as a whole in this portion even, but definitely in the Torah as a whole, is like the tabernacle involves all the senses. And this is one of the things I love about Jewish tradition. It's one of the things I love about the Passover Seder, is that it engages your senses. It engages your whole being in some sense. So thinking about like tabernacle, life and service, is that the priests are smelling incense. They've tasted the sacrificial offerings. They have felt sacrificial blood on their hands. They see the light of the menorah and they hear the bells on their clothing. So everything about the tabernacle is engaging all of the senses. And I think just like our life with the Lord is meant to engage all of that too. I think that's meant to be a principle that's carried out. Like as we are engaging with the Lord and worshiping him and seeing his presence throughout the world, I think that he wants us to engage all of our senses in that as well. So we made it. Yay. It was great. See, aren't all these instructions about the priest great? Yes.
Great.
Great job, but
I feel like I need to clear something up
before we leave.
Yes. Lori is an exceptionally intelligent person. She has my respect. I have no problem telling her she's wrong, but this was not the time and place for it. Since I did it in front of you all, I will apologize.
Wow.
We admire you.
Yes.
I have a question. When you were saying like, why doesn't have Moses something that sets him apart? Did you mean for the people to see it, or for it to like set him apart before the Lord? Because I think I misunderstood why you were asking that, or just in general, all the things.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It's good. No, it's good.
We're done with that conversation.
It's good. All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom. Lord, continue to be with us. Amen.